In the weeks that followed, Bidemi's life felt like an unending battle. The weight of her past, and the mounting pressure from Eo's deteriorating mental and financial state bore down on her shoulders like an unbearable burden. But deep inside, a flicker of faith remained, faint, yet resolute. Each night, after closing her salon, Bidemi would retreat to the small room at the back of her house. There, she would fall to her knees, her voice barely more than a whisper as she poured her heart out to God. "Lord, please, hear me," she would beg, tears staining her cheeks. "I am broken. My spirit is tired, but I will not give up. I need you. I cannot continue this way." She would fast for days, going without food, only water to sustain her, as she clung desperately to the hope that somehow, things would change. She prayed for Eo, for their marriage, for their finances, anything to stop the endless cycle of pain and degradation. At times, her prayers felt like echoes in an empty room, lost and unheard. There were moments when she felt like the walls were closing in, when every part of her seemed to scream in desperation. But she would not let go. She couldn't. The prayer continued. Still, Bidemi's life continued to turn into an endless, suffocating whirlwind. Each day, it felt like she was drowning under the weight of Eo's frustration, the bitter sting of his insults, and the desperate struggle to hold on to whatever shreds of hope she had left. The once warm and loving man she had married now stood before her as a shadow of his former self, broken, angry, lost in the darkness. And she, too, was sleeping. Every tear that fell from her eyes felt like a silent prayer she couldn't speak aloud. Every word of criticism from Eo chipped away at her resolve, yet she clung desperately to the one thing that had always been hers, faith. Her body ached. Her heart trembled with exhaustion. But still, she prayed. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting an orange glow through the small window of their home, Eo came home late. The door slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. His steps were heavy, loaded with the weight of another failed attempt to rebuild his life. "You're still here, huh?" he sneered, looking her up and down with eyes that were no longer filled with love, but resentment. "What are you doing, waiting for a miracle? You think God's going to come down and fix everything?" Bidemi remained silent, her fist clenched. She had heard it all before, the rage, the hurtful words meant to break her. And yet, she stayed. She stayed, not out of weakness, but because she believed, even if the belief seemed impossible. But that night, she was cracked. The hurt had built up for too long. She couldn't take the words, the cruelty anymore. And as Eo continued his tirade, mocking her silent prayers and quiet strength, Bidemi broke. I can't do this anymore, Eo," she cried out, the rawness of her voice echoing in the small house. "I can't keep pretending like everything is okay. I can't keep waiting for something that never comes." Her body trembled with emotion. "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to us?" Eo, unmoved, scoffed. "I don't care, just leave me. I am tired of this miserable life. Maybe if you leave, I would get my life back again. You have brought me nothing but misery." Her heart shattered with his words, but she didn't let them defeat her. She retreated into silence, walking away as her tears fell, one after another. That night, as she lay on the cold floor, her mind heavy with the weight of her suffering, she reached for the only solace she had left, her prayers. "Lord, I can't bear this anymore. Please, save me," she cried and then fell asleep. The next morning, Bidemi woke up feeling tired but prepared for her salon. She went to the village market to look for customers, but with her reputation, it was difficult. Thankfully, she found a few customers, and the day gradually became busier. It was a quiet evening when Bidemi, exhausted from another long day of hairdressing, sat in her home, gazing at the darkening sky. The struggles of life weighed heavily on her heart. Eo was out again, trying to secure odd jobs, and the silence in their home reminded her of the emptiness left by their losses. She bowed her head in silent prayer, tears trickling down her cheeks as she asked God for direction. God, she whispered, if there's something I'm not seeing, show me. If there's a reason for this suffering, please reveal it to me. I can't bear it anymore. As she sat there, lost in thought, a knock on the door startled her. Wiping her tears, she stood and went to the door. Before her stood a man she had never seen before, a tall, configured dressed in a simple white shirt and trousers. His face bore a serene expression, and his eyes held a kindness that immediately put her at ease. Good evening, Mo, he greeted, his voice firm but gentle. Good evening, she replied, unsure of who he was. My name is Pastor Gabriel, he said. I don't know you, but as I was praying earlier today, the Spirit of God led me here. He told me there is something in this house that has brought a curse upon your life. Bidemi blinked in surprise. I don't understand. What do you mean? She began thinking maybe it was another scammer. The pastor paced in front of her house, his eyes closed in prayer. He suddenly stopped. Sister Bidemi, he said in a calm but firm voice. There is something in this house. Something that is not ordinary. Something that is holding you and your family in bondage. Bidemi blinked again, confused. Something in my house? No, Pastor, there's nothing. I've been here for years, and I don't have anything strange. Pastor Gabriel stepped closer, lowering his voice. There is something in this house, an object that has been the source of your pain. God has shown me that it is tied to your suffering. Bidemi's heart raced. She wasn't sure whether to believe him, but his words resonated deeply. She stepped aside and invited him in, unsure of what to expect. Inside, Pastor Gabriel prayed, asking for divine guidance. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and looked directly at Bidemi. Is there anything in this house you use regularly, something you inherited or that was given to you as a gift? Bidemi thought for a moment. There's nothing special here, Pastor. Just our usual things. The pastor shook his head. This is not just any item. It is something you received as a gift. Something that came into your life during a special occasion. Think carefully, he urged. It might be something you've overlooked. Bidemi frowned, trying to think. A gift? I don't understand. I haven't received anything or gift since after my wedding. At the mention of her wedding, Bidemi's mind began to race. She tried to remember all the gifts she had received. Plates, cloths, jewelry, nothing seemed suspicious. Then, out of nowhere, a memory flashed in her mind, the mortar. She barely thought about it as it was simply part of her daily life. There's a mortar in the kitchen, she said hesitantly. But it's just a regular mortar for pounding yam and spices. The pastor's eyes narrowed. Take me to it. In the dimly lit kitchen, Bidemi pointed to the mortar. Pastor Gabriel approached it slowly, placing his hand on the dark wooden mortar. As he closed his eyes in prayer, his expression turned grave. This is it, he said firmly. This mortar has been cursed. It's the source of your suffering. Bidemi staggered back in shock. Cursed? How? I've been using this mortar. Bidemi paused as realization dawned on her. God is revealing to me that someone close to you used the mortar to bind your destiny and transfer your blessings to their own family. Every time you use it, you unknowingly renew the covenant. Bidemi stared at the pastor, her heart pounding. Why would someone give me a cursed gift? What have I done to deserve this? I have never harmed anyone. I don't understand. This mortar is evil, he declared. Every time you use it, it strengthens the covenant the person made with dark forces. Your blessings and those of your husband have been stolen to benefit their family. Tears welled up in Bidemi's eyes as the realization dawned on her. When she thought of anyone who could be the cause of her predicament, only one name came to mind, her best friend, Titi. Bidemi began to wonder why Titi would go to such lengths to make her and Eo suffer. Could it really be true? Still lost in her thoughts and trying to make sense of it all, as the pastor placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Sometimes, envy drives people to do unimaginable things. It may not be about anything you did but about what you have, your blessings, your happiness, your future. But take heart. God has revealed this to you because He wants to restore you. What do we do now? She whispered, her voice trembling. Pastor Gabriel instructed her to gather olive oil and salt. We will pray and anoint this mortar. Then, it must be burned completely. You must fast and pray for 3 days to break the covenant fully. Pastor, please wait for me. I go bring the olive oil, she stammered, standing abruptly. Without waiting for a reply, she grabbed her scarf and rushed out of the house. Her feet carried her swiftly to her mother, Mama Tinu's house. The memory of their last argument was fresh, but none of that mattered now. Bursting through the door, she startled her mother, who was seated in the living room. Bidemi. What is it again this time? Mama Tinu exclaimed, her voice filled with irritation. Breathless, Bidemi darted past her mother without answering, heading straight to the kitchen. She flung open cupboards and searched frantically, muttering, "Where is it? Where is the olive oil?" Mama Tinu followed her, shocked by the frantic behavior. What on earth are you looking for? I need olive oil. Bidemi cried, her voice desperate. Mama Tinu frowned. Why do you need olive oil? What is going on? Finally, Bidemi turned to her mother, her eyes red with frustration and fear. Pastor Gabriel said there is something evil in my house, the curse in the mortar Titi gave me on my wedding day. We need to anoint it with olive oil and pray to destroy it. Mama, please, I don't have time to explain more. Mama Tinu froze, her face slowly transforming with shock. What? What mortar? Are you saying it's Titi who is behind all your suffering? I don't know. Bidemi said. All I know is I need olive oil now. Mama Tinu stared at her daughter for a moment before rushing to her bedroom. Moments later, she emerged with a bottle of olive oil and handed it to Bidemi. Let's go. If it's true that Titi is behind this, we'll settle it once and for all. I have never liked that girl, you see why I chased her away, Mama Tinu said, try to make her Bidemi feel she is always right. They hurried back to Bidemi's house, where Pastor Gabriel was waiting. Together, the three of them prayed fervently, anointing the mortar with olive oil as they pray over the mortar, calling upon God to break every curse tied to it. Bidemi sobbed as she begged God for forgiveness, strength, and restoration. When the prayers were done, the pastor led her outside. They placed the mortar in a fire pit and doused it with oil. As the flames consumed the wood, Bidemi felt a weight lift from her spirit, as though chains that had bound her for years were finally broken. Suddenly, from miles away in her house, Mama Shola screamed. She clutched her chest, falling to the ground as an unbearable heat engulfed her body. Fire! Fire! Someone help me, she wailed. Her neighbors rushed to her aid, but they found no visible flames. Instead, Mama Shola was writhing in agony, her skin drenched in sweat. It's the mortar. It's burning me, she screamed, staggering to her feet. Driven by an unseen force, she began to run, her legs carrying her toward Bidemi's house as if compelled by the very guilt she had been hiding. A commotion erupted in the village as Mama Shola ran through the streets, shouting, I will confess. I will confess. Villagers gathered as she collapsed in front of Bidemi's home, trembling and crying. Her voice was hoarse. As she fell to her knees at Bidemi's doorstep, crying out, Forgive me. Forgive me. It was me. I did it. Mama Tinu stepped outside, staring at Mama Shola with a mix of shock and fury. Shola. You were the one behind my daughter's pain. And Bidemi, who stood there frozen, could hardly believe it was Mama Shola. She had already started judging Titi, not knowing she was innocent. Her hands trembled as the weight of the revelation hit her. Why would you do this to me? What wrong did I ever do to you? Bidemi asked in disbelief, her voice filled with hurt and confusion. Mama Shola sobbed, her tears mixing with the dirt on her face. It wasn't about you. It was your mother. Mama Tinu was always bragging, always looking down on me because my children weren't as successful as hers. I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted her to feel pain, to see her daughter suffer, so I put charm on the mortar I gave you on your wedding day. Mama Tinu, who had been standing silently, now stepped forward, her face pale with shock and anger. Shola, we were friends. How could you harbor such hatred in your heart? I never meant to hurt you, but even if I did, I will never go this far. This is unforgivable. Mama Shola continued, I know nothing can undo what I've done, but it was your fault, Tinu. Don't blame me. Ever since Bidemi got married, Mama Tinu has gotten worse, always looking down on people and insulting them. The crowd that had gathered gasped in disbelief. Meanwhile, Eo was at the farm, clearing a dense patch of bush, when he suddenly froze. It felt as though something heavy shifted within him, an unseen burden lifting. He staggered, confused, as an unexpected sense of relief washed over him. Before he could fully comprehend the feeling, a young boy ran up to him, shouting, Uncle Eo. There's trouble in your house. Mama Shola is confessing. I don't know why. Eo dropped his machete, his heart pounding, and rushed home. By the time he arrived and saw the scene unfolding, he understood the invisible chains that had bound him for years were finally broken. Mama Shola's vision began to blur as she spoke. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear the darkness creeping into her eyes, but it was futile. I can't see. I can't see, she screamed, clutching at the air. Her legs gave way beneath her, swelling rapidly until she could no longer stand. The villagers gasped as the once proud woman was reduced to a trembling, blind figure on the ground. But her suffering did not end there. In the days that followed, her children, who had once been the pride of the community, began experiencing inexplicable misfortunes. Despite everything, Bidemi found it in her heart to forgive Mama Shola. She knelt beside the woman who had caused her so much pain and whispered, I forgive you, but I hope you find peace with God. The villagers, moved by Bidemi's grace, began to see her in a new light. They apologized for their gossip and judgment, realizing they had been wrong to blame her and Eo for their misfortunes. Mama Tinu, humbled by the ordeal, vowed to change her ways. I've learned my lesson, she told Bidemi. Not every success should be shared openly. Sometimes, silence is the best protection. As for Bidemi and Eo, the curse was finally broken. Eo's business began to flourish once again, and their lives slowly returned to normal. Though the scars of the past remained, they emerged stronger, their faith unshaken and their love for each other renewed.